Hi, everyone. We're the Good Doctors of Abbey Research. I'm Dr. Kristen.
I'm Dr. Erin.
And you are exceptionally welcome to our channel. We are two PhDs, believe it or not, in social science who really love talking about culture, both popped and lived around the world. We explore themes of society. We talk and teach about empathy and inclusivity and intersectionality through this lens of our cultural analysis, curiosity, and conversation. And we talk about everything from systemic racism and how diversity shows up in Bridgerton to the latest round of Hallmark Christmas movies and what they say about humanity within them. The gamut is wide, and we are thrilled that you can join us.
We are here today with a video in our Colonizers World Tour series, where every week for the rest of this year, we are going to look at a country and how its history and engagement with the world can be understood through the lens of colonization. And so right now we are looking at quasi-colonized, not really colonized. It's complicated. The first month we were with never colonized by Europe countries. There were 4. Now we have a relationship with some European countries before we jump into like proper colonization. So today's video, we are talking about the Iranian film, because this week we're focusing on Iran, Offside, which was, I'm checking notes, a 2007 movie directed by Iranian director Jafar Panahi, who is like the star of Iranian directing, as far as I can tell from looking things up. This movie, Offside, is available to rent on Prime Video, which is where we found it. And the guts of this movie is based on actually Jafar's own experiences of his daughter being kicked out of a football match because women in Iran cannot attend public sporting events. And so the story is about a qualifying match between Iran and Bahrain leading up to the World Cup, and the story of 6 or 7 women and their attempts to dress as men and sneak into the match and what happens. It was actually filmed at the qualifying match. So fascinatingly enough, he had 2 endings for the film, depending on the outcome of the game, which I find really interesting. We're not going to talk a lot about the story of the movie because it's very self-explanatory. The women don't make it in. This is the story of their engagement with their captors. They're caught and detained right in the concourse outside the football match by National Guard members. And that's kind of the story of the film, their interaction with these Guard members and trying to explain why they care about football, why they should be allowed in, why they're not allowed in. And it's a cultural exploration of these kind of gender restricted roles. Dr. Kristen, what would you like to cover in our analysis of Offside?
I mean, there's so many things. There's a scene in the bathroom that we're going to talk about for a long time, but first I want to give some context. We learned a little bit about the context around this movie that fascinates us. So first of all, it has never been screened in Iran, and yet it's like one of the most popular movies in Iran. So I think that tells us a lot about, like we talked about yesterday in the other day in the overview, the 101 overview, there is a massive difference between government and people.
Yeah.
And while that is true in every country around the world, excuse me, it does seem exceptionally marked between the people of Iran and the government of Iran. That there does seem to be a bit of a significant and marked gap.
Yeah.
Additionally, none of the women that were cast in this movie are actors. The director walked around the university and found actual authentic football fans and cast them. He then told them to just dress up as boys and show up. I love this so much for several reasons.
You get like 7 different interpretations of like how you would dress as a boy.
Just like a boy. I loved it so much. Additionally, he applied to the Ministry of Art or whatever he needed to be able to make this movie. They denied it and he made it anyway. So this is a good reminder too that art is a resistance, a major resistance of people of every nation, every country, whether you live in a society with completely free media or you live in a society with regulated media, art is often resistance. Clothing is resistance. Fashion is resistance.
Yep.
There is lots of small ways that people in whatever country and government system that they are in routinely show their priorities, their humanity, their interpretation of life in their own spaces as often as they can. Like we talked about that with the Hadors and the nose jobs and kind of what that all looks like and how people navigate that. So I want to also say we are massive football fans.
Yes.
But neither one of us would do what these girls did.
Oh, absolutely not.
Absolutely not. But I love that there are women out there that for whom this is like the dream. That was great. So all of that context made it so much more rich for me because really this movie feels and moves along the beats like a documentary.
Yeah.
It doesn't move in a narrative rhythm quite the same as it would be of a scripted fictional show. I'm actually not 100% sure how much of this was scripted. It wouldn't be surprising to me if these are all just conversations that people would have.
Yeah.
And the other thing that Dr. Aaron learned in reading some reviews was that in Iranian cinema, men and women do not touch. And so all the conflict has to be done through dialogue, which would also explain why this movie is so talking heavy and not very moving heavy.
Like action heavy. Yeah, because so, even though this is I would say art as resistance 100% in telling this story, because it was filmed at an actual football match, they still had to perform within the bounds of these gender restrictions.
Yeah.
And to me, like I agree with Dr. Kristen. I find the context of the film almost more fascinating than the content of the film. And because I learned this, and then as I was watching the film, I was like, are those real people? Like, those are the real football fans. Like, who are the actors? Are those real members of the National Guard? Like, you couldn't really tell. And I think it's such a risky way to make a film, but with like phenomenal payoff. And
the other aspect is like none of the characters had names.
Yeah.
And like normally when we don't name women, that pisses us off. But I actually really love that we didn't name the women in this one because they're stand-ins for so many other things. Like this movie is completely about football and not about football at all. And in a way that only somebody who lives this every day could tell this story.
Yeah.
If an American was going to come in and tell a story about how women weren't allowed at football matches, this would be a completely different movie and I wouldn't like it. I'm going to almost guarantee you. So I liked that this was so much more of an exploration of this, as much of the system behind it. Like, for example, after the girls are kind of all corralled into a pen, and they're talking to some of the National Guards, antagonizing the National Guard members, into trying to explain to them why women can't be in the football match. Yeah. And the National Guard men just keep saying, like, I'm sure all the things that they've heard on the radio or from their family, and the way that the actors are, or perhaps actual humans, I'm not sure, but the way that the performance is that it's just so rote. It's one of those times in which these girls have been thinking about this for 20 years. And these men have been thinking about this for 20 minutes. Yeah. And the girls can poke a hole in every single statement that is made because this level of misogyny defies logic.
Yeah. And I think it does such a great job of showing how enculturated our gender roles become. So if you don't ever have to interrogate it, you don't question it. It's just the way it is. Like, you can't.
Why are you questioning this? What do you mean women should be able to go to football matches? But then they can hear the chants, and the chants are coarse.
And so, and it's this weird balance that I was thinking about, that like apparently the Iranian men are afforded this freedom to just kind of let loose in these environments and say things that they wouldn't say in normal mixed gendered society. And they're kind of allowed this space where they can just be fully themselves and be football fans. And the women are not allowed this freedom, but it's to protect them because they shouldn't hear these inappropriate things. And I was like, well, then why are they saying these inappropriate?
And why this is like a thing in every society that like we are too delicate to hear profanity or sex jokes or something. And I was somewhat saved from this by having a younger brother who never saw me as a girl. So I've never understood where people are like, well, you know, it's mixed company, or I'm sorry I spoke in front of the ladies. Like, my response usually is to just then like curse like a sailor, and be like, no, whatever you can say in front of me. Like, I don't care. And I can tell in people's faces that it makes me less of a lady.
Yeah. And so
it's not just in Iran that we have this puzzle. That conversation happened 2 weeks ago in Philadelphia. So
yeah, and that's a really good point, because we often try and point out, like, when we are talking on this Colonizers World Tour about the universality and the specificity of the art that we're watching. So this was both very, very specific to Iran, but then there were a lot of, as especially both of us as avid sports fans, who have encountered not this, but physical barring access, but a lot of barriers and a lot of questions about, you know, whether I'm a much bigger ice hockey fan than I am a football fan. And my whole, I've literally been going to ice hockey games probably since my mother was pregnant with me, but at least since I was like 1 or 2 years old. And then hockey is not a woman's sport, like questions about my femininity because, oh, you just like it because the guys are hot. Like, no. So we've all had that experience on some level of having our gender questioned or our sports love questioned, because you can't be both a feminine woman and a sports fan, which is just bollocks. But I think for me, that's one of the best scenes in the movie is when, spoiler alert, Iran scores a goal. If this match happened in 2005, so hope we're not spoiling any World Cup qualifiers for you. And the women just go nuts because they're football fans. And we're kind of given the perspective of one of the guard members during this scene. And you can see him watching their joy. Like, it is magic. They are chanting. They know all the chants. They know all the sing songs and everything. And he's just kind of puzzling with like, and you know, I read a lot into his expression. He didn't say anything, but I kind of read into it like, they just look like football fans. Like, they're not doing anything. They are genuinely excited about this. And that paired with the other guard, like being the radio announcer for them, because he could kind of look in and see. I loved that scene so much. And they were like criticizing his commentary.
Yeah.
Like, I don't care about these rural players. Like, tell me what's happening. Who has the ball? So I think that was a small moment where we got a glimpse of, you know, what happens when you start to poke at these expectations and understandings of gender.
The only other scene that we want to talk about really briefly is a scene where one of the girls has to go to the bathroom. And obviously there are no female bathrooms in this stadium because women aren't allowed there. It's a really long walk from where they are. This girl obviously has to pee really, really badly. They make her wear a poster as a mask at one point because no one can see that she's a woman. There's a whole thing over making sure the bathroom is completely empty. The guard blocks men from coming in and using the toilet at the same time, even though every single stall is an individual,
like cubicle,
like an individual room. If you've ever been in international toilets, this is frequent in a lot of my international travels, that they are completely separate rooms, not like just the half doors that the United States has a lot, because a lot of other places value privacy differently than we do. It's a separate conversation. But what got me, I mean, first of all, the insanity of making her wear a mask, the worry that she could read and she could read some of the things written on the walls. But what really hit me is, like, we often say, and kind of glibly, that misogyny hurts both men and women. And it's true, but like, you know, it's sometimes hard to show examples. Here's a real concrete one. Those men had to pee too. And because of completely made up ideas about how women can interact with the world that are passed down through religion and culture and reinforced every day through the intersection of religion and culture within Iran, those men couldn't pee.
Yeah.
And it's, you can say that I'm reading into it. I'm not. Like, that's a thing that affects them. And then to watch the men react about a woman being in the bathroom was delightful, I say sarcastically, because then we get also the narrative of that the only women worth protecting are daughters and sisters. And with the complete forgetting that she is somebody's daughter or sister, but also that, like, that's not how we have empathy for human beings, which is they're human beings. But the connection to men is what brings value to women's existences, both in this culture and honestly in the UK and the United States, as we record this in the third week of March, and have seen evidence of that on our Twitter feeds. So it's misogyny does the systemic and default prioritization of male feelings and male experiences hurts
everybody.
And this is a small but tactile reminder that everybody should pee wherever they can.
Yeah, and like, you know, this is a conversation we've had a lot on our YouTube channel, specifically about kind of bathroom equity around the world and gendered bathrooms. Like, we all pee in the same toilets, folks. So especially if these were like closed doors, as they were, but there was so much this idea of like seeing the woman and like physically seeing her, and then her also seeing how men behave in this private space,
which, like, by the way, is never actually a surprise. Like, we know
you write shit on the walls, and like,
we know you're we know you're crass, and we know you make jokes about women's bodies, and we know that you're terrible to each other, and we get it.
I have to pee, like,
cool, like,
and to me it was a really long scene, y'all, and we could talk about it for a long time, but the way that the guard was so protective of her and the men were so upset about it, but then eventually they get into a scuffle, the men and the guard, and one of the football fans, the men, like, lets her go. And he kind of like looks at her and is like, and there was a series of men in this film that want to try and help the women, or, you know, the one of the main young women is on a bus of supporters and gets recognized as a woman, and this young man offers to help get her in, like, all, you know, you're not going to make it, you look too much like a woman, I'll help you. And she's like, no, I can do it. So that's I think a good place maybe to end again is this idea that there's a huge difference between the state and the people. And I think the men of Iran, like the women of Iran and all the folks of Iran, whatever gender spectrum they fall on, you know, exist and think differently about things. And so there were men that were really upset and really offended that these women tried to get into these match. And there were men that on the other end of the spectrum were like, but they're just football fans.
What's our drama?
They're not hurting anybody. So I think the movie does a great job of showcasing that.
When we rented this, it cost $4 US.
Yeah.
Can't recommend. That's less than my latte that I got the other day at my local coffee shop.
Spend the money.
It is definitely worth your time. I will tell you, much like many movies made not in America, the rhythm is different. The editing is different. The scenes are longer. And there is not an urgency of storytelling the way there often is in American movies. So let yourself sit with this one for a little bit. And we would love to hear your thoughts. Please, if you are watching this on YouTube or wherever else you're watching it, comment below. Tell us what's going on. Get in touch with us across our socials. And we'd love to hear your thoughts, not only on this particular film, but any art that has been produced by or about Iran that doesn't have to do with war. We are not going to be talking about Zero Dark 30 or any of the other ones. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And the kind of what that looks like. But which I know that's Iraq, but people confuse it all the time. Just trust me. We've gotten this question. So somebody asked me if we were covering Zero Dark 30 for Iranian week. And I was like, no.
It's not Iran.
Okay. But next week, we're heading to Saudi Arabia. which is also a fascinatingly gendered society. And by fascinating, we mean vaguely infuriating to those of us who are outside and inside of it. Spoiler alert. So we will see you then.
Take care, everybody.